I could never have imagined that a simple swipe on a dating app would change my life so profoundly and terrifyingly. When I met Alex, I was coming out of a long and difficult relationship, seeking some lightness, someone who could make me forget past hurts. He seemed perfect in those first few weeks. Attentive, affectionate, and always ready to make me smile. His good morning messages and calls before bedtime quickly became the highlight of my day. Alex was charming, the kind of person who knew exactly what to say in any situation. Our first dates were magical, candlelit dinners, long walks through the city streets, and even an unforgettable night watching a basketball game, where he made sure to explain every rule to me since I knew nothing about the sport. It seemed like he had entered my life to bring everything that was missing. But behind his charm, something else was hiding, a side I would only begin to see when I was already deeply involved. As Alex became a constant presence in my life, his true nature began to reveal itself, and the fairy tale I was living slowly turned into a nightmare I could never have predicted. As the months passed, Alex's behavior began to change. What initially seemed like care and attention slowly turned into possessiveness and control. He started questioning whom I talked to on social media, why certain people commented on my photos, and why I took so long to respond to his messages when I was at work or with friends. Alex's jealousy knew no bounds. He insisted that I share my real-time location whenever I went out without him. On one occasion, he showed up unexpectedly at the bar where I was with coworkers, his hard expression and cold eyes watching me from across the room as if checking if I was really where I said I would be. These unexpected visits became more frequent. Alex seemed to believe he had the right to know every detail of my life, and his constant presence was starting to suffocate me. Attempts to discuss space and privacy only irritated him, and his responses were always evasive, followed by promises that he would change. But the promises never materialized, and the pattern of behavior only intensified. The worst moment occurred one night when I was alone at home. Late at night, I woke up to the sound of something breaking in the living room. My heart raced, and a chill ran down my spine when I heard cautious footsteps approaching the bedroom. It was Alex. He had broken into my house, claiming he needed to talk because I wasn't answering his calls. The fear I felt at that moment was paralyzing. His expression was not of concern but of anger and desperation. That night marked the turning point, and I knew I needed to act before things escalated even further. The night Alex broke into my house was the limit of the terror. As I faced him standing at my bedroom door, the dim hallway light cast disturbing shadows on his face, making him look more threatening than I could have ever imagined. His voice was calm, but there was a coldness in his eyes that made me tremble. "We need to resolve this now," he said, his voice low and controlled. "You can't just ignore me." I backed up against the wall, my heart beating so hard I could hear its echo in the silent room. "Alex, you need to leave," I managed to say, my voice trembling. "This isn't right. You can't just come into my house like this." He took a step forward, and I could clearly see the imbalance in his eyes. "I only come because I care," he said, "because no one will love you like I do." At that moment, the reality of the danger I was facing became crystal clear. Every cell in my body screamed for me to flee, to escape that situation before it was too late. With immense effort, I managed to move, running to the bathroom and locking the door. I could hear Alex banging on the door and yelling for me to come out, but I was paralyzed by fear, unable to respond. After what felt like an eternity, the shouting stopped and the sound of footsteps moving away gave me a glimpse of relief. I woke my best friend with a desperate call, and she came to get me immediately. In the following days, with the support of friends and family, I sought a restraining order against Alex and began the process of moving to a new apartment, far from where he could find me. I moved to a new apartment in a building with better security, installing cameras and always double-checking the locks on doors and windows. I started attending therapy to deal with the trauma and fear that relationship left me with. Gradually, I began to regain my independence and inner strength. This is the end of my story. It was frightening to live through, but it is a lesson I will carry with me forever. I never imagined that falling in love with Emily at that party would change my life in such a drastic way. It all started on a typical night among friends, where loud music and laughter filled the air. Emily, with her contagious smile and vibrant energy, seemed like a figure straight out of a fairy tale. She was the kind of person who lit up the room, and I was immediately drawn to her. In the first few months, our relationship was everything I could have wished for. We went out for dinner, watched movies together, and she often surprised me with small gestures that made my day. Emily met my parents, and they loved her. It seemed like I had found my soulmate, and everything seemed perfect. But as time went on, I began to notice small changes in her behavior that made me uncomfortable. At first, they were just little things like the way she insisted I respond to her messages immediately. Over time, these demands increased, and she began to question every aspect of my commitment to her. In this early phase, the story was about a romance that promised eternal happiness, but the cracks were already starting to show, though I was still blinded by love. The setting of college and my parents' house, where we spent most of our time, seemed safe and familiar, but was about to become the stage for a series of events that would test my sanity and safety. As the months passed, Emily became unrecognizable compared to the woman I fell in love with. What were once small insecurities turned into constant and suffocating distrust. She began to demand proof of my love in ways that made me increasingly uncomfortable. For example, she wanted me to cancel plans with friends to stay on the phone with her for hours, just to prove that I cared. The arguments became frequent. Every meeting, every message not answered immediately, every inattentive glance during a conversation could trigger an emotional outburst. On one occasion, during a dinner with friends, Emily started crying and yelling at me in front of everyone because I was talking to a classmate. It was embarrassing and frightening, and I began to feel like I was walking in a minefield. The climax of this tension occurred on a night that seemed to be just another quiet night at home. We had a trivial argument about something I can't even remember, and suddenly, without any warning, Emily grabbed my laptop and threw it out of the second-floor window. The shock of that destructive act was a turning point for me. I realized the situation was out of control and that I needed to make a decision. The college environment and my parents' house, once places of comfort and safety, turned into settings of a growing nightmare. After the laptop incident, I decided to end the relationship. It was a difficult but necessary decision for my mental health and safety. Emily did not take it well. At first, there were incessant messages, alternating between pleas to get back together and angry accusations. I tried to stay calm, but the situation soon escalated into something more sinister. Emily began using social media to attack me. She hacked my accounts and sent offensive and slanderous messages to friends and family, trying to isolate me socially. With each new attack, my world seemed to crumble a little more. But the real escalation of terror occurred when she started dating Jake Miller. Jake was known for his explosive temper, and it didn't take long for him to get involved. One night, while I was home alone, I heard a noise coming from outside. Upon checking, I saw Jake vandalizing my car with a metal bar. The streetlights caught the maniacal gleam in his eyes as he smiled at me, his expression distorted by rage and malice. I ran inside and locked all the doors, my heart racing as I called the police. While waiting for the police to arrive, I heard loud banging on the front door and Jake's voice, shouting threats to break everything if I didn't come out. The fear paralyzed me, but I knew I had to act. I grabbed a nearby lamp and prepared to defend myself in case he managed to get in. Fortunately, the police arrived before the situation worsened. This episode was the peak of the terror, marking a point of no return in my battle for safety and peace. The fear that something worse might happen became a constant in my life, a shadow silently following me. After that terrifying night, I took legal measures to ensure my safety. With the help of the police and a lawyer, I obtained a restraining order against Emily and Jake. Knowing they were legally required to keep their distance brought immense relief, though the fear of retaliation lingered for some time. In the following months, I rebuilt my life cautiously. I reconnected with friends and family, explaining the situation and rebuilding the bridges Emily had tried to destroy. Gradually, normalcy began to return, and with it, a new perspective on relationships and trust. I hope my story can serve as a lesson and a warning, and that by sharing it, I can help someone recognize the signs of a toxic relationship before it's too late. I met Claire at a professional conference in a fancy downtown hotel. She was one of those people who light up a room with her charisma and intelligence. Our conversations flowed naturally, from work topics to personal interests, and it wasn't long before we started dating. Everything seemed perfect at first. She was attentive, fun, and captivating. At that time, I lived alone in an apartment in a less safe part of the city, but the feeling of insecurity never bothered me as much as the charm of having Claire around. Our first few months together were marked by candlelit dinners, long walks in the park at dusk, and cozy nights watching movies late into the night. I was completely captivated by her, and every moment together seemed to solidify our relationship even more. But as time went on, I began to notice certain behaviors that I hadn't seen before, or perhaps didn't want to see. The initial charm of our connection started to be overshadowed by a shadow of jealousy and possessiveness that I did not expect. At first, these traits appeared subtly, little messages asking where I was or with whom, until they turned into demands for constant details about every aspect of my day. Claire started getting irritated whenever I mentioned coworkers, especially women, and her reactions grew increasingly intense. As the months dragged on, the situation only got worse. Claire started showing up unannounced at my professional commitments. On one occasion, during an important meeting with a client, she burst into the conference room yelling, accusing me of flirting with a colleague who was presenting the project with us. The incident was embarrassing and damaged my professional reputation, as everyone at work began looking at me differently. Claire's obsession didn't stop there. She would take my phone while I was showering or sleeping and send aggressive messages to my female friends, telling them to stay away from me. Over time, I noticed my circle of friends shrinking. People avoided me, and those who stayed expressed concern for my well-being. Nights became unbearable. One night, I woke up to the sound of scratching at the apartment door. I knew it was Claire. Only she would have the audacity and motive to be there at that hour. I thought about confronting her, but the fear of what she might do paralyzed me. Every sound in the hallway, every shadow cast by the streetlight through the curtains, made me fear the worst. The next morning, with the sun already up, I looked at the door and saw the insults she had carved into the wood during the night. They were words of hate and veiled threats, the kind of thing you never expect someone you love to say. It was then that I realized I needed to act, not just for myself but for my safety. The most terrifying night occurred a few days after the scratched door incident. I had already decided to end things with Claire, but before I could, she took drastic action. It was almost 3 in the morning when I woke up to the sound of something breaking in the living room. My heart raced, and the silence that followed was almost as deafening as the sound that had awakened me. Armed with nothing but the flashlight on my phone, I walked quietly down the hallway. The air was thick, laden with a mix of fear and adrenaline. When I reached the living room, the beam of light revealed the vase my mother had given me, now shattered on the floor. But what really chilled my blood was the silhouette of Claire standing by the broken window, through which she had evidently entered. She saw me and started walking toward me, a disturbing smile on her face and a kitchen knife in her hand. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, but her words were harsh. "You will never leave me, understand? We are one now and always." I backed away, trying to keep the distance between us while desperately trying to think of a way out. With every step I took backward, she advanced too. My mind was racing to find a solution, anything that would allow me to escape that situation without either of us getting hurt. After a few minutes of a tense cat-and-mouse game in my own living room, I realized that my only chance was to distract her and run to the door. With my heart in my mouth, I threw a table ornament in the opposite direction, and when Claire turned to investigate the noise, I ran like never before out of the apartment, screaming for help. The neighbors, alarmed by my screams, came out to see what was happening, and Claire, realizing she couldn't do anything in front of witnesses, fled. In the following days, I took the necessary legal measures. I filed a police report and, with the help of neighbor testimonies and the evidence of the threatening messages Claire had sent, I obtained a restraining order against her. It was an exhausting and emotionally draining process, especially reliving the events in court, but necessary to ensure my safety. Though the emotional scars took time to heal, the relief of knowing Claire could no longer torment me gave me the strength to move forward.